In this video, we're going to learn how to write JSON formatted content to files in Python. To get started, just create a new empty Python file. And at the top, we're going to simply import the JSON library. No need for any fancy downloads. It should come baseline with the Python that you have installed on your computer. You should just be able to type in import JSON and have it work. And what our goal is here is to eventually be able to write contents to a file. I'm going to call this output tester.json because our formatting is going to be JSON. We don't just want a basic text file. We want something a little bit more specialized. We're going to write to it, and we're going to write something that we'll decide later to it. So our ultimate goal is to write to a file. And what's in between is kind of the new stuff here. So let's just see for now, maybe we could for now just write a basic word hello and then write this word to a file. Let's just double check. I'm just going to kind of minimize this down here for now. And there's our word hello printed out to the file. It works wonderful. Kind of an older way of us working with file systems. But I want my content to retain a bit more information than this. So what we're going to be doing is using the JSON library. So I'm going to get JSON referencing the library, and I'm going to use one of its methods called dumps. If you highlight it over, you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here, but this is ultimately, with all the kind of extra detail described, this is going to be able to format and serialize something into a JSON formatted string. If you use the dump option, you'll see that it also can format things, but we want to use the dumps just to be a bit more flexible for some of the things we can do down the line here. And what we're going to be able to do here is pass in our previous data. And what dumps is going to do, it's going to output a new string with this content formatted in a JSON format. So I need to manage this output. I'm just going to say maybe JSON output. And we're going to have this output be printed. A reminder, you can press pause at any time if you need some more time to absorb what you're seeing here. But for now, I'm taking this word and I'm converting it using the JSON library into a JSON format, dumping it out in a string that I can now write to this file. So let's run this. And note, I'm not sure if you noticed this, there's a bit of extra information now. We have these extra pieces of punctuation, quotation marks, that signify this as being a string. Just to kind of really point this out here, if I go back to writing just the string directly, notice there's no quotation marks. If I output it in JSON format, the JSON format communicates information about the data type in its output, which is really useful for being precise and retaining kind of the nuance of information here. And we'll see how this expands a little bit more concretely moving forward here. All right, let's do something a bit more interesting. Rather than a single variable, what if we made this a list of words instead? Make sure you update both variables so that we're converting the new thing that we're building. And I'm going to turn this into a tuple data structure. Hello, goodbye, and see ya. And what's going to happen if we take our words data structure and have it converted to JSON and output that to a file? Well, let's find out. Please test this yourself. You should see that it now retains information in the output file that it's a part of this data structure, this array or this list of string contents. Really useful because that information has been retained, and we now know in the source inside the program there was a certain data structure format, and in the output that we're persistently saving, we have recorded that using the proper JSON syntax. Really useful. One more thing to note, though, is that in the previous video, I showed you how JSON is kind of a bit more human readable as well. And this single line of code is, or the single line of output is kind of all jammed together on one line. So one other thing that we can do is actually specify an indent kind of prettifying process here that allows us to have the contents, each different entry indented 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, you could make this quite a bit more dramatic if you wanted to, but it becomes a little bit, I don't know, sloppy looking, not as nice. 4 is a nice kind of standard amount. You can decide your preference, really. It doesn't make a huge difference other than what you prefer for readability. Here is our list, and here's our entries. Awesome. So what else can we write? Well, what if we did like 2.3 and 5.7 and oops, 3.1.14159.265.358.979 and so long. I did memorize that, so don't judge me too much. All right, we see that data structure is retained in this kind of double or float format. And awesome, that's really useful. Okay, let's wrap this up a little bit. You may or may not have seen this data structure in the past, but we're actually able to create something called a dictionary. Just like in the dictionary that you might read, which has a word and a definition attached to it, in Python, if I use these squigglies, I'm able to create a dictionary, which goes something like this. Maybe I say a name as a label here. With a colon, I can write my name as the name that's attached to this. So I have a label and I have the value that's attached to it. And if I write this to my file, I see I have an identifier, the key, and then the value attached to that. Okay, awesome, interesting. This is a really important thing to know about for JSON because fundamentally, a lot of the JSON information is stored as key value pairs, especially when we are working with more complex objects like we'll do next. So note that we can do this manually ourselves. We can store things as dictionaries, but they'll also be part of the solution to things like classes, which we'll look at next. So before you watch the next part of the video, maybe press pause and test out these data types that they're working for you, that you understand them, and maybe mess around with a couple other structures of data that you are familiar with and just kind of see how JSON outputs them. And then you can press play after you've practiced a little bit. Okay, hopefully you've practiced. Hopefully you're a good student and are listening to your teacher's instructions. Otherwise, well, you're not going to learn as well. Anyway, we're going to move on. So I am going to just copy paste this in from my notes on the side to save some typing time here. I have prepared a little bit of a template for this concept of a student. The student is initialized with a name, age, and a major. So they have these kind of field variables associated with them. And now I could create, let's just instantiate one. Let's make a student. And to do so, I'm just going to have, I don't know, maybe myself, past me, 20 years old, maybe taking computer science, oh, not computer science, as a major. And so I now have instantiated the student object. And what happens if I just write this to an output? What happens here? Well, nothing much. I have an issue with, it has to be string, not a student object. So, okay, I can't just write this to the file. So I could kind of like specify how to make a string from this object in some custom way and have it all output. But even then, the issue would be I would just have like a simple text output of the information associated with me without it actually connecting back to the class structure. This is where JSON can be really helpful because I'm going to be able to make a JSON output based off of my JSON library dumps feature that allows me to take in a student, and let's just keep the indent 4 thing here, and we're going to write this JSON output. But here's the thing. If I try to do this by itself, I'm going to have an issue. My type student is not serializable. Serializable is a fancy word that basically means converted into a binary or kind of a data format that's acceptable to be kind of transitioned to a different context. So to serialize my class, I need to provide a little bit more instruction on how I want that conversion to happen, because it doesn't know out of the box what to do with student. And if you do some searching online, you'll find that there's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to show you a nice simple way to have a basic class structure written to a file that you can use for now. We're going to use something called a lambda or anonymous function. This is basically a function like you could write a function elsewhere in your program, def, and give it some information and then use it. An anonymous function or a lambda function lets me just kind of create a function right here in place, and it just does its thing once when I need it to in this context. So it's kind of like nice and short and sweet and to the point. And I'm going to call this function O, and I'm going to run this little piece of logic here. And so, oh wait, why am I writing it here? I wrote it in the wrong spot. My brain is moving ahead of myself. I meant to write that here. Apologies for that. I'm just getting caught up in thinking about how I'm going to talk rather than thinking about how I'm going to write. So make sure you write it here in the JSON dumps section. We are writing a little anonymous function that what it's going to do is going to take the object that's being passed in, so the student thing, and it's going to convert it into a series of dictionaries. Remember how we saw before that we have a key value pair? Well, here we're going to have a key of name and a value of whatever its entry is. The name of the variable becomes the key, and its actual value becomes the value. And so this conversion can happen automatically in a really succinct way here. A really useful thing to know. Okay, let's run this and now see what happens. And look at this. My object's contents now have been converted into a dictionary. Remember I said the variable's name will be the key, and the actual entry value will be the name. The variable age has its value of 20. The variable major has its value of computer science. So now I have a way of actually mapping the object's attributes to a persistent text format using dictionary formatting, which this strategy accomplishes without any extra heavy lifting needed, which is awesome. I recommend that you now try to create your own basic class, define it with your own custom variables, and see how that is output. Maybe even try to add a bit more complexity. Maybe make another variable that has a little bit more sophistication to it and see how that plays out. And after you've practiced a little bit, I will see you in the next video.